Who the Wild Things Are with Ryan McGuire.
You gotta listen to your body.
Oh my God, maybe, I could get out there, I could do this.
Let's take a ride, find your wild side, real stories, see with your own eyes.
It's so beautiful.
I'm gonna have the best time out here.
Yeah, I was in tears. I was like, that's the best, man.
Welcome back to Who the Wild Things Are. This is episode 12. And over the last year, we brought you guys 11 very different, very wild guests, each of them wild in their own way. All of those episodes you guys can check out on Spotify, YouTube, wherever it is that you watch podcasts. Thank you everyone behind the scenes that has helped make this podcast happen. I surely haven't done it alone. And big thank you to you guys. So, with that said, moving forward to this evening, we are on episode 12. Episode 12 is a really, really special guest, Jonas. Jordan is probably most well known for his season 6 Alone victory. If you're not familiar with Alone, it's a show on History Channel that Jordan had to survive alone in the Arctic. And besides that, he's done so many other wild things in his life. That's what's going to make him an excellent guest. And with all that said, let's get him on here. Thank you everyone for joining. It's been a while since we've got to do this. Hey, Jordan.
Hey, man. How's it going? How's the sound and everything?
Good. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome, man. How you doing?
Good, great. I just got the kids set up on some Bugs Bunny, so we should be good for hours and hours and hours. Just kidding.
Right on, man. I think the last time I saw you, you were in my neck of the woods getting ready for an elk hunt. How'd that end up?
Right. Yeah, it went well. We did. We went up and ended up getting a nice cow, and freezer's full. So yeah, it went really well. It was actually a lot of fun. Fun hunt. Went to some new country I'd never been before, and yeah, it was a blast. How about you? What were you up to at the time?
I was actually getting ready for a whitetail hunt in Nebraska, and
oh yeah.
We headed out there. I had a doe tag, and I had a close encounter with the doe that I ended up passing on. She was holding a foal, kind of on her rear quarter. And,
oh yeah.
Yeah, I ended
didn't have
up
the heart
up on the shot because I was actually scared that if I shot a pass through that it would hit the foal. So that was like
oh yeah.
I was that close. It was pretty.
Oh wow.
So it was.
Were you with your recurve?
I actually had made the longbow that week. It was a Osage longbow.
Oh wow.
So,
that's cool.
Yeah.
Well, dang, that was a good opportunity.
Yeah, and we had a great time. We got to see a bunch of wildlife, so definitely no regrets there.
Yeah, as always. That's awesome, man.
Awesome.
Nice.
I think a lot of people recognize you, first off from Alone, but I think from what I can tell, there's a lot more to your story, especially like your background. So I'm interested to hear kind of how Jonas got to where he is now. Like, what's the background? Where did you grow up? And were you always an outdoorsy individual? Was that something you were thrust into?
Yeah, so my background, I mean, I grew up for the most part on a farm up in North Idaho, and I was actually born in Illinois, but then when I was pretty young, we moved back up there. My grandparents had lived there forever, so grew up on a farm, which means you're always kind of, pretty outdoorsy, doing stuff outside. We camped and all that a lot, and explored the woods. We had some really nice woods up where we lived, but my dad wasn't really a hunter, and he worked a regular job and was pretty much 9 to 5, and so I didn't get into hunting until later in life. That more came after I went to Russia and spent a lot of time, they basically subsistence hunt over there all the time, so I was always around that. And then when I got back from Russia, I would always start, then I got really into hunting, mostly bow hunting, and down in Virginia, because that's where I was at the time. And So as far as hunting, that's how it goes. But yeah, I grew up in Idaho. When I was 18 or 19, my brother invited me to join him riding freight trains around the country because he had done that for years at that point, and he asked me if I wanted to join him, and I was just working a job at the salad dressing factory. So I quit that, and yeah, we spent a summer going across the country, and it was awesome. It was the first time that I got a taste of the type of lifestyle that I would only really then later taste when I was living with like nomads and natives in the wilderness, where you don't have any schedule, you don't have basically your daily needs are the only thing you are worried about. It's probably kind of how we were designed to live, and how people have lived forever, pre-modern era. And so it was really interesting to get into that rhythm of life, and and really appreciate it. It's hard to go back to a normal way of life after that, because you get a taste of like, oh, that's freedom. That's what life is supposed to be like. And I could keep going. Of course, then after I was down in Virginia working a job down there, and I had an adopted brother who wanted to find his biological family when he grew up, and just tell him thanks for giving him a chance or whatever. And so he did, and it turns out he had a biological brother that was going to go over to Russia and help some missionary guy build an orphanage. And he told me about it, and I was like, oh man. And I thought and prayed about it, and I felt really like, yeah, it's the right thing to do, I guess. So I just basically bought a ticket for a year and went to Russia, and then lived with
Real quick, I'm curious. So it seems like your brother's name's Ben, right?
Yeah, Ben. That was actually my other brother, Caleb.
Right. I remember Ben, when I met you guys, he had the foot injury. Is he better now?
Yeah, it's slow healing, man. He's still in the process, but man, those feet are a lot of bones in there. But he's healing up. He's tough. He'll do it. But I know it's been disappointing. He really likes jiu-jitsu and stuff, but it sometimes comes with some injuries.
Yeah, with the price to pay. I'm curious, like, what were your parents like? They see both of their sons go off and run across the country in like an atypical lifestyle, and then it seems like they maybe endorsed like your decision to move across the world and live in Russia/Siberia.
I think my brother had done a lot of heavy lifting on that, because he had like basically hitchhiked to Reno and then hopped on freight trains and disappeared for years. And he would call occasionally, of course, and but I think basically my parents were of the mindset that, hey, if we're not like doing drugs and going crazy and, like living the wildlife too much, that I think they just felt like, what, we're in the good Lord's hands, and kind of let it go. Mom was pretty hands off, and, as was Dad, as far as like letting us just live our lives as we felt, fit. And, so in that way they were really supportive, and I think that was a big asset. I didn't feel like, I felt pretty free to do whatever I felt was the right thing. And
I think that's pretty rare these days. Like to have parents who are hands off and kind of let their kids explore their own path. So I think that's
I think that was really good for me. I think I know for myself, where I was given, that trust as a young person when I was young, I usually rose to the occasion. Whereas I think if you try to, hold people too tight, you can kind of crush them, and they react against that. But they did a good job of just letting us live and trusting that we were doing the right thing. And it is perhaps uncommon, but it was definitely empowering for me, or, I think something I would like to model also.
For sure. I think it's a really admirable thing, because I'm sure as a parent, I'm not a parent, but I'm sure that there's like some anxiety there. So
for sure.
On top of that, you let them know, you let your family know you're moving to Russia to go build orphanages. How did that unfold? And was Russia like always on your mind, or did it just kind of spawn?
No, it really wasn't. I was always into history, and I'd actually was really into like reading about German, Russian, like Eastern Front memoirs, and so I had done a lot of that, and I'd read the Gulag Archipelago, and so I was kind of, and that was a really impactful book for me, by the way, as a young dude. You know, it was really valuable to read, but it was brutal indeed. But I didn't thought about Russia in particular. It was really only when that particular opportunity arose, and I felt really strongly, you know, led to go there, that I was like, well, I guess I'm just going to go there and figure it out. But I was kind of I was going in a little bit blind. I didn't know what to expect or anything. And, of course, it's always different than you expect. And I lived with the American guy who was an awesome dude for a while, but I wanted to live with the Russians, so he actually sent me to a neighboring village to live with a Russian family the guy's wife was in the hospital, and he needed to go to work. He had 2 little kids. I had never dealt with kids. I didn't know the language or anything, and he basically just was like, oh, yeah, watch my kids. I'll see you later. so that was a big learning curve, and I would later think about that, because that first year where I was just in that Russian village, I mean, the people I was with were awesome, but I felt more isolated there than I would ever on alone or anything like that. You know, I remember laying in my bed just being like, oh, I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. Like, you know, I was... Wow. Although, you know, in hindsight, it's a lot of fond memory. You know, it was cool, Russian village life, cutting hay with a sigh. But there's something about not speaking the language and being amongst a lot of other people that do. You know, that you kind of just feel really isolated. And over the year, you know, I learned Russian, and then I kind of, you know, the whole world over there opened up for me, which was awesome. Both of the guys I lived with, there was kind of 2 families I bounced between. They had both been in prison for considerable amounts of time in Siberia, and they had a third friend who was a fur trapper up north, and he had also been in prison with them, and they were always like, hey, you got to go meet our buddy up north, and eventually made the connection, and that guy invited me up to the far, you know, northern Siberia, and kind of went from there.
So that's the taiga, right?
Yeah, and the taiga. So fortunately, it wasn't in the tundra. Yeah. Okay, we're gonna walk over here. I like that it was in the taiga because it was forested, and if you've ever seen that documentary Happy People, if you haven't, you should. But it was actually not far from there at all. Oh, hold on, it's buffering, they say. Oh, okay, hold on. Did you guys touch a button? Oh, there. Sorry.
No worries. It's all good.
Hold on. Let me find a better spot. All right. Go in the kids' room here. Anyway, wow. We all back online?
I can hear you fine.
All right, cool. Where was I?
So we were talking about you had gone to Russia, and then the fur trapper kind of introduced you to these folks that were living nomadic.
Oh yeah, real similar to Happy People. So that guy that I lived with was, you know, just a fur trapper and had been since Soviet times, and basically took me out one season, and he had not been trapping for like 7 years when I went up there, and I was kind of like the inspiration for him to get back into it. He was like, oh, okay, you know, I'll go back out. But that meant that all his lines and stuff were totally abandoned, and he hadn't been there forever, but he basically showed me a topographical map and was like, oh, there's that cabin. So we're basically 5 weeks, you know, in separate parts of his territory, and we'd kind of hunting season stocked up the cabin and with some noodles and things like that. But aside from that, it was whatever you fished and were able to get. And that was my, you know, first real, aside from a week riding freight trains, that was my first real significant time being alone, you know, and that was an interesting experience. I was only, I don't know, 22 or something like that at the time, 23. And yeah, that was fascinating. I think a lot of the lessons that people learned when they were on alone, that was when I really kind of learned those lessons. Like I remember being really struck by the fact that, oh man, I have these little unturned, or I guess little issues, like little things I should resolve with people that that aren't that big of a deal, but when you're out there, you just think about them all the time, and you're like, holy cow, I can't allow that to, I can't allow it to, like, occupy my mind out there. So on a situation like alone where you're going to be for months, you would, it definitely made me know that, like, oh, you got to make sure all your ducks are in a row before you go out there. You're not going to escape your psychology out there.
Yeah. I've had that before where I come back and the first thing I want to do after a solo, instead of eat, is call the 3 people that I've been thinking about the entire time I was out there.
Right. Whoever that was randomly.
Whoever it was. Sometimes it's like a person I haven't talked to in 10 years, and sometimes it's someone who's close to me. It depends on whatever's going on in your head, but when you have no other human influence, it just bounces between your ears for days.
Absolutely, yep.
It doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a fascinating thing to notice. And hopefully a catalyst to help you figure that stuff out.
Yeah, it's really good for you. Now, one of my friends actually told me, so, the idea of going 24 hours with no human influence, whether it's no people, and I think also no books is a good thing because books are people's thoughts. But if you do that 24 hours completely alone, you have like those, instantly you start having all those thoughts about that kid that you were mean to at a barbecue when you were 14. Totally. It's like all these little...
It's amazing what's tucked away back in there. Yeah, it really is fascinating. Stuff you would have never thought you'd ever remember again. It starts popping up. And I also, as you're saying, like, books are life, though, and they are, like, in general. But it is cool to have an experience that kind of takes all distractions away, and it's just you and your head and your situation. It is pretty wild. I know on my season that Brady, you remember Brady? He was doing pretty well on Alone, but then he kind of just tapped out. Anyway, he was saying if you ever want to know what it's like out here, draw a circle and stand in it, a circle in the sand and stand in it for 24 hours, and you'll get, like, where his psychology was at. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's interesting.
There's a native practice where you would do the same thing, except you'd use rocks. So you would mark the directions with rocks, and then you'd stay inside of the perimeter of that circle for 24, 48 hours. And it's hard. It's really hard.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard for me, too. Like, I'm a pretty active person, and I like to stay pretty active all day. I mean, I remember even after I got the moose on the show, I was like, well, I should probably save calories. And so then you get your moose smoked and all that, and I sat in my shelter for about 2 hours one morning. I was like, okay, that was the longest 2 hours of my whole time out here. I'm going to go fishing.
What skills did you really learn, like in terms of hard skills, when you were in the taiga? So for folks maybe that haven't heard, you were living with nomadic reindeer, which is caribou. So caribou herders in the forest, and you were learning all these skills. What skills did you really develop during that time? Yeah,
anyway, after that fur trapper guy, all his cousins were these native nomadic reindeer herders, and he, liked me, and so he was like, I'm going to go take you out to my cousins. He basically took me out on a snowmobile, dropped me off at the tipi, and, vouched for me. And those guys, it was all happened really organically. So they basically took me in like part of the family right away. And it was a big learning experience right off the bat. The very first thing I did when I was there was, I told them I work construction or whatever. And they're like, oh, great. Well, you can build a food cache. We need to build a new food cache. So they kind of showed me how they build those elevated food caches. And a little bit like I built on Alone, although I never quite finished that one. You'd usually put like a walled-in cabin on the top of the stilts, and then you're kind of, safe from everything. But so I built one of those right away, and that was a good, useful, hard skill. And then, of course, you're always getting meat. You're always hunting, so everything's they're always looking for moose, always looking for grouse and whatever it is, fishing all the time with different techniques. I know, fishing with nets, that's not something you do very often in the States. And out there, they use a lot of nets, and you'd learn little tricks like putting it under the ice. Or one thing also worked for me out there was, put my fish under, or my net under the ice. Oh no, they're yelling again. And then I hung a little metal shiny things in the net, and that's actually where the big pike that I caught at the end there struck. And so, little tricks like that. Smoking meat, preserving meat in the summer when you get something big in the summer, that's a big deal. And we would do that a lot, get a big moose in the middle of the hottest part of the summer and just have to, preserve it before it spoils. So, I mean, there's the list of skills kind of goes on and on. Just living in the, negative 60 degrees at times, that. Just how you go about living in those situations, what you prioritize. And in general, I think it was really helpful to live with people who truly, this is Zaya, my son. He's apparently got sick of Bugs Bunny. But it's, just seeing what's practical for people in real life and what's, more of just, there's a lot of really cool skills you learn, but that you might not actually use in a situation. Zara! So that was kind of separating the wheat from chaff. Mm-hmm.
When you were out there, I want to get, all the way into the alone stuff, but just drilling down into living with those folks, did you notice that it was kind of like the Warner Herzog stuff? Like, did you notice those folks were actually happier than typical folks?
Well, that's a good question. Let me just compare them to themselves. When they were, when they were, Zaya, go watch the movie. When they were in the village, so there's like village life and there's wilderness life. And when they were in the village, it was actually really rough. So my first impression of going to the natives was in the village, and everybody's drunk. The murder and suicide rates are like 1 in every 3 people there die of homicide, suicide, or accident. So it's like insane. And even in my own time being there, I have a lot of, probably half of the people I know there, it seems like, have died, of one thing or another. It's really rough in the village. What's an insane contrast is those same people out in the wilderness, where all of a sudden these people who you would think of in the village as like, wow, just drunk, like on a level we've never seen, all of a sudden out in the wilderness, they're like happy people, they're knowledgeable, they're hardworking, they're, very productive, very proud of what they're doing. It's a night and day difference with the exact same people. And so, and I've been to Evenki villages where they don't have reindeer herding anymore, and it was just a black hole. Just everybody's drunk all the time, even kids and stuff. There's just, you go to the village, you can never get a night's sleep because there's always people like barging in the house drunk, like, oh, like, it's insanity. But when they still have their traditional way of life, there's like a place for those people to go and like be proud of what they do and stuff, and it makes a huge difference. And it influences the whole village because the whole village is kind of proud of this thing that's going on around them. So, excellent. Yeah, it was. It would be too simplistic to just say they're happy people, but if you kind of compare themselves to themselves in the wilderness versus the village, it really is a stark difference. And I think, I'd often, of course, thought about Native Americans and reservations and stuff, and I thought, man, I wish there were more traditional paths forward. It's not like everybody's going to choose that path, but as long as it's an option, a lot of the people will. And I found with the natives, it was usually the people that were the most, the people you'd probably want to have a conversation with the most interesting people that would, desire to keep their ways going and live in the wilderness. And they're like, it was pretty fascinating. On the flip side, it's hard. Like, life is hard in the wilderness, you know, and it's different for men and women, and it's a pretty traditional society. So, men, like for me and the other guys, we're out there always hunting and fishing and trapping, and it's pretty awesome. I think for a lot of women, it's harder to get the women out there. So it's kind of ends up being a shame, because the coolest guys that are all the reindeer herders, you know, can't really find wives that want to be out there with them. And then the kind of degenerate guys that just live in the village, you know, they have access to all that. So it makes for an awkward draw. It really feels like late 1880s Native America, where you're really hoping it makes it through. But it's got definitely some holes in the dam that, you know, need to be plugged or something. You know, it's tricky. So it's a complicated story, and it's all complicated by their history, you know, like Soviet collective farms and stuff really did a number on their culture.
Because they were probably taking all of that land and all of the reindeer from the herds, right?
Yeah, so it actually kind of happened weird. You know, a big part of Soviet propaganda was what America did to its native populations. So, oh no. Hold on 1 second. So it was what they did to their native population. So actually, in Russia, they tried to help their natives. Unfortunately, you know, it's still all through a Soviet system, so everything's collectivized. So all the reindeer herders that were pre-Soviet times, which was really only in the 30s, that had more than 500 reindeer were considered, you know, kulaks, which would be like rich people. And so they were all sent to prison camps, as were all the shamans, all their like religious leaders. And so they kind of gutted their culture and then collectivized it. Then what happened, though, was they actually ended up getting their tribes did pretty well, because the government pumped a lot of resources into it because it was part of their propaganda. But, and, you know, I'm sure they had genuine interest in seeing it survive. But then when Soviet Union fell apart, they had created an entire dependent system, and then it collapsed, and then the natives were just left without the whole support structure that they had been given, and all the reindeer that they had built up for those last couple generations. So they had herds of like 5,000 reindeer. All of a sudden, overnight, they were just private, and anyone could come buy them. And so the Russians came in and bought all the reindeer and then just sent them to the meat market. So it was just a mass slaughter of all these people's generations of work. And, you know, the reindeer herders that are there now are just, you know, living off the few reindeer they were able to purchase and privatize and kind of keep going. So kind of just crazy stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like any time where there's like a mass, like, just really like taking the livelihood out of people, it almost like skips a generation, because then there's like a generation of people in the middle who don't really know that trade anymore, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. That's the roughest part, is once you lose it, it's gone forever. It's like not everybody has to live like that, but as long as some people do, it's always an option for people. But as soon as one generation loses it all, it's just all gone. And so it's so important, you know, it's really important that they can keep it going, because I do, like I said earlier, the difference is night and day as for personal psychological health on how they're living.
Absolutely. That's a really, really interesting story. It's a very unique perspective that you have. I mean, I don't know anyone else who's ever gone and lived, you know, in that time. So I think that's a really
super
cool,
common.
Right. It's a cool insight that you have. So
yeah.
You kind of, you had that opportunity, and you really became an outdoorsman, I think, like kind of through those experiences and also on your own when you came back. How did the alone thing happen? And I guess for the folks watching live, you know, what is Alone for anybody who hasn't seen the show?
Oh yeah, this is a show my buddy told me about it. I think the first 2 seasons had come out, and it's a show where you get 10 items, basically real basic items like axe, saw, fishing hooks, a few things, and there's 10 people, and they're all dropped off in separate locations, and whoever lasts the longest, you can tap out at any time. Long story short, whoever lasts the longest wins, and so it could go up to a year on my season, so that was pretty, it's pretty wild, but I had watched the first 2 seasons when my buddy told me, and I kind of, just on a whim, you kind of watch the show, and you're like, oh, why aren't they hunting bears, and then I sent in a link to my YouTube videos living with the natives over there, and what you don't know, of course, there's like regulations and stuff that you don't know when you're watching, so they might have if they could have.
Right.
But anyway, I sent the application in and then forgot about it. It was just on an evening kind of whim, and then I think season 3 I was too late for. Season 4 was teams. Season 5 was like returnees. So it wasn't until 3 years later that I just got a call out of the blue. I was doing a construction job, and they were like, hey, this is a loan, and I had to be like, wait, what? Oh yeah, holy cow! And they made it sound like they were pretty confident. They wanted me on, and so I was immediately like, whoa, hold on, let me think. I forgot about that, and so, but I couldn't say no. Like I didn't know where it was going to be, so you kind of wonder where they're going to put you, but I knew it was a pretty golden opportunity. So,
absolutely, yeah. That's
mm-hmm.
I think it's one that a lot of people now with the show's gain in popularity have like gone for. So I think it's almost like winning like a wilderness lottery if you're
totally.
A normal person. At what point did you realize that you were pretty much going to your home field, aka like the Arctic, like the really cold weather?
Yeah, when they told us, I think I can't remember. It's going to be somewhere like coldish, and I think when they told us. It was probably a month before drop-off. I can't remember, 2 weeks or a month before drop-off. And, immediate, you don't know how it's going to go. You never know how life in the wilderness is going to go. Even the most skilled people can have something happen or whatever. But what I did know is that it was possible and that, I'd never been to the Northwest Territories in particular, but in the North, it's a place that rewards activity and rewards hard work and stuff. And so just knowing where it was gave me like, okay, I know I can make it happen if if I'm on my game. And there were a lot of, you go on Reddit and you read all the stuff, and there was a lot of talk about how, oh man, you can only starve to win this show, and they had done there was from pretty popular YouTube guys, like, the whole breakdown of how the calories are impossible to gain in, that situation, and the only thing you can do is gain a ton of weight and sit there. And there was a lot of talk about it, but I just knew, once I knew where it was, I was like, I know it's possible. I know I can make it happen. So it's got to get up there and see if you can actually do it,
Yeah. You gotta put it all together. That's
just knowing, and you're going to fail at stuff. I missed a moose. That first moose I missed, which was crazy. And then you have to recover and, think on the fly and make it happen again. Yeah, anyway, we'll get all there or whatever, but jumping the gun. But
no, you're good. So when you land there, what was kind of your first thought? Like, they drop you off. Typically people, think
my thought was food. When they dropped me off, I was initially thinking about, okay, first you think, well, this sucks, my spot sucks. No, it's just like you have your initial reactions to your area, and then it's not what you would picture, of course, so you have all that to deal with. And then, but it was all like, okay, what way is the prevailing wind coming from? What's the terrain look like? How's animal movement going to happen? Where should I put my shelter that's going to disrupt the least, the already existing patterns? And this first moment, while I've only been here 30 minutes, is where you really want to take advantage of the fact that animals aren't used to you being out there. So I got my bow immediately and did a big walk around my territory and shot a rabbit right away. So that was like, take a lot of pressure off. You're like, yes, you know, like I got today's meal. And then, so it was all, you know, my shelter was really effective, but I built it in a day basically. You know, it was all I would have needed all winter, but I built it quick, and then it was going to, you know, you can continue to add on to it throughout, and I did, you know, tweak it. But I was basically throw up a shelter, find a good location. I moved, you know, half a mile from where they dropped me to where I wanted to be based on wind direction and animal patterns and stuff. And then every day was just hunting, fishing, scouting, putting up snares, and I was just being really active. You know, I basically leave in the morning and come back in the evening from whatever scouting I was doing.
Yeah, so you basically went like atypical, and instead of like doing the starve thing or the sit and starve, you did like to go out and try and find food.
Well, I thought it was a huge disadvantage for me to be thin and have a high metabolism. In some ways, I mean, of course it is, but for me psychologically, it was good because I knew that starving wasn't an option. Like, I saw everybody else there. I was like, man, I'm going to be the first out if it's a starving contest. You know, so I was like, I'm going for it. And I was, just activity the whole time, you know, and once I started getting, you know, you get 10 snares out, 20, 30, 40, you know, you start getting all those snares out and you start getting rabbits and it starts rewarding you, you know, the fishing was hard initially. It took a long time to nail the fishing down. I eventually did, and it was the funnest fishing I've ever had. But they didn't show any of that on the show, but it was, you know, you're catching like 25-pound lake trout on your stupid little rod. Like, yeah. So
dude,
exciting.
Those lake trout were massive.
Oh, yeah, just a blast, man. It was a really good time fishing once I figured it out. But I didn't actually catch a fish until after the moose. So
that's when you need it, right? It's when you need the fat to pair with all the protein.
Exactly. Although the protein thing with a moose was a little over dramatized. Like, you can definitely live off of a moose for a few months. I think it was there was a lot of food on a moose. I think that was they played into that one a lot. I've had to tell a lot of people, you know, just to clear it up, no, you can live on a moose, you know, it's basically what the natives do all the time, so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, especially if
what is true is rabbit starvation, and I had never lived solely on rabbits, and so I was curious, well, you know, how long can you drag out just a rabbit-only diet? And but turns out it's not like a year. It's basically as soon as you start eating a rabbit, you're already starving. So I caught 28 rabbits in the first 20 days or so, and I lost no less weight than anybody else out there. So I was losing a pound a day just like everybody else. Now, it might have been paying for my activity, but it wasn't like sustaining, you know, in the long run. Yeah,
I think what people don't realize with an animal is they think about quarters. So they think about like the muscle and the legs, but what you don't realize is a kidney is just engulfed in a giant ball of fat. So like that alone can sustain a human for... That
was the gold mine, and that is particularly... So I had a lot of fat, because there's a lot of other fat on the animal, but that's the fat that the wolverine stole, was that little ball of kidney fat out of the moose.
And it's the best
which was very disappointing.
That's the best fat there is.
Oh, yeah, that was very disappointing.
So let's dig into that. So you had a food cache, and you were kind of hiding certain cuts and fat away from the other animals, and you ran into a wolverine issue where you guys kind of scratched.
Well, yeah, what happened was, you know, when you get a moose in a wilderness like that, there's a ton of stuff you have to do. It wasn't yet cold enough to be safe. You know, it was getting in the 50s and stuff in the day, so I had to get out there and like smoke my meat, preserve everything, you know, just take care of all the stuff you have to do. Meanwhile, you kind of got to come up with a way to protect your meat, whether you're hanging it in trees or what, but I was mostly worried about just getting a bunch of smoke on it. And So like you saw, I turned my shelter into a smoker and all this and that. Well, I also thought I didn't want to hang all my meat up too far or whatever, because I wanted to, I thought a bear might still be in there. And I built that low shelf in front of my shelter that if a bear came, I could shoot it, basically use my shelter almost as a blind. And I really expected a bear to come once I had the moose down. And so I kind of left should have been a little more careful, but I kind of had my meat pile on top of that shelf. And I'd found a gallon jug that I packed full of that kidney fat, and I've made some other containers I put other fat in, but that particular gallon jug I set on top of that shelf, and then I just figured, I'll wake up if a bear comes, and then but when I went out the next morning, it was just a morning or two after I got the thing, I went out and I was like, first I started seeing tracks all around, and I was like, what the heck? And it doesn't dawn on you right away, because as much as, every fur trapper in Russia tells you about the scourge of the wolverine, I hadn't actually ran into one. So it wasn't something that was in my consciousness, at the tip of my tongue, so to speak. And so when I went out there, you're just like, what? Tracks. And then you're like, I was like, oh, no. And then you start, okay, what did he grab? And you look around, it slowly dawns on you, where's that jug? And then you're like, no, what an idiot. And so then anyway, my plan failed, because a bear would have made enough noise that I would have heard it and come out and shot it and doubled up. But a wolverine just slyly came in and pulled one over on me. And so then it was like the battle was on, like I knew it was going to go down, because he knew where the food was, and he wasn't going to leave it. He started to get really bold. I'd be out there scraping the moose hide in the middle of the day, and I'd just see him like dart by trying to grab your bow and fling an arrow. But yeah, it was very different than the moose hunt, because the moose hunt, I remember every bit of it, and it was it was like probably the most exciting day of my life, but also one of the most like roller coaster up and down, because, I mean, we can talk about that too, but the wolverine thing was pure, like primal, it was primal for sure. Like when one of the nights prior, we'd been going at it for a week or so. And I'd set up a perimeter of cans with like string, so that every time it came onto my peninsula, I'd hear like a clank, 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 and then I'd get ready and try to capture it or whatever. There were certain things we weren't allowed to do, like bait traps and such. So you're a little bit limited in your toolkit. But so I one night heard the cans go off, and I ran out and I saw the thing behind a bush, and I could see its eyes, and I had my bow and I was ready to shoot. But I was waiting for it to come out of the bush, and he kind of blinked and took off, and I never saw him again. I was like, dang, I should have just shot it through the bush. And then the next night, same thing, I hear another clank, and I ran out. And this time, just as it was scooching along past the bush, I just sent an arrow in there. And, immediately I could see it, like, the arrow ricocheted through there and, like, pinned it through the leg and into the ground and was stuck in the alders. And it was just kind of like a chaos for a second. You could see it flipping around, and I just grabbed my axe and ran over there, and that was like, it was just primal, before I knew it. He jumped at me, and I have the, like, picture memory of his, like, little snarly self jumping at me. And then I swung, and the first swing, like, disemboweled him, and then he spun around, but he was pinned by the arrow still. And then he jumped again, and then I just swing, and I was like, over before it started. I was like, holy cow, what just happened? But it was a wild time.
You kind of ended up getting your fat back in a way from him.
Yeah, the wolverine's not a particularly fatty animal, but yeah, I definitely ate you got to eat the heart if you kill a wolverine with an axe. And I ate all the organs and, tried it out, had a drumstick, but it was kind of skunky, musky meat. So I waited to finish it for when the moose was gone. Save it for a dark day together with all the smoked rabbits and stuff.
Yeah, or chum your gill net or something.
Yeah, totally.
So
but
walk us through that moment where you kind of spot and stalked that moose. What was that like?
Yeah, the moose hunt was cool because it was, what I liked about it, we've all been in the woods and we've like all gotten lucky before in the woods where you're just at the right place at the right time and this and that. That moose hunt felt to me like it was really well earned. You know, like I spent hours and hours just calling moose and scouting my territory and looking for sign and you know, kind of figured out, you know, okay, well, here's where their trails are. And so then I set up some tin cans with string across their trails and tried to set the cans to where they just clink gently if you walk through it, but it'd be an odd sound, so it'd catch my attention. And sure enough, I was out, or, you know, I'd heard it. I think that was on the show. One night I had heard a moose, but I was like in the middle of the night, zipped up in my sleeping bag, and you can't be like, you know, because you're going to get out. And I was like, man, it's better to just, if he's right close to my shelter, it's better that he just, you know, cruises around and thinks it's safe than to go out and blow it up. So I was like, waited till the morning, and I was like, man, I got to, you know, make sure that never happens again. So I went out, and that's when I put the strings up so that I'd get an early warning if they came by. And then, sure enough, you know, weeks or sometime later, a week later, I heard one of my cans in the morning go clank, and I was like, oh, man. And I ran out of my shelter. It was like in the morning again, and it was the morning after I noticed a little pattern. When they did show up, it was always like the full morning after I had been moose calling a bunch. So it would just take them. They would just meander all night and then finally get there. And then, sure enough, there he was. It was like the biggest moose I've ever seen. You know, he was just a monster. And he had ran through that can, scared himself, and then ran towards my shelter and then turned around and looked back at the cans. And so when I came out, it was like almost perfect. He was facing away from me, like quartering away, looking at the cans. And I came out, but he was out in the mud flat, and I could only get so close. And he was just so huge, I thought he was closer than he was. And so I went back to shoot, and I guessed he was like 30 yards, and I shot. I didn't have anything to go gauge it by, and I shot, and it like dropped short, and I was like, ah! And then, like an idiot, I looked, and I'd grabbed my camera and not my quiver, and I was like, no! And then he had a stupid thing, like, stares and looks at me and then starts meandering off, and I was like, no! I ran back. But, you know, what was really funny was that in a moment like that, when the stakes are so high, you'd think you'd just be like, man, this sucks. But I was just super excited. I was like, man, I felt like I just saw a dinosaur. That was awesome. And I was sort of disappointed, but I was like, okay, I got to, like, work double time now and make up for that and make sure that, you know, another opportunity happens. And so I waited and I tracked that moose, and when I was tracking it, I could see it kind of went between, I mean, there's not cliffs, but there's kind of a valley that they would come through, probably 300 yards wide or something. And I just thought, man, I should build one of those reindeer fences that we build in Russia, you know, like to keep the reindeer in, because oftentimes moose would end up in our reindeer fences, you know, and you'd build these 30-kilometer huge fences with no nails. They're just stacked logs. And I thought to myself, man, am I really going to spend the calories to build a giant fence out here? But I'm like, well, I'm here to, like, make it happen. So, yeah, so then I just did. I just started building the fence in a big, giant funnel fence and funneled all the moose traffic that could potentially come through the valley into one trail. Did the same thing, tweaked my can setup and kind of made everything work a little better, and then went back to snaring rabbits and exploring and calling moose and all that. And then, yeah, one morning I was out, actually had a rabbit in a snare, and I heard a clunk, and I was like, no way. And I was, and so I was like, oh man! So I just ran over because I had like placed the mouth of the funnel kind of near a bush that would be a good bush to hide behind, and I just ran over to that bush, you know, as quietly as I could, creeped over there, and waited, and then sure enough, this moose just comes lumbering along the fence, and you know, you're just like, no way, no way. And it probably would have came and come through the funnel 10 yards from me, and I would have just stuck it, you know, right there, easy shot. But of course, you don't want to screw up. So as soon as it was 23 or so yards from me, I just shot, and it was quartering towards me, which is a tough archery shot. And I hit it, and it felt like a really good shot, but I was like, I was a little more to the right than I wanted, and then it took off, but I was like, oh man, and then it just was on as far as the roller coaster, because it ran off, and you're just so excited because it felt like an excellent shot. They were good enough, and it took off, and I followed the blood trail and saw some bubbles, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. So then I went back to my shelter and skinned that rabbit and just tried to pass as much time as I could. And then I was like, okay, I can't wait any longer. I got to go track this thing down. And then the blood dried up, and all the hoof tracks ended, and I was just like, no way am I going to lose this thing. Like, no way. And, so then you start, everybody that's bow hunted and lost something, you're like, no way. But I was like, I knew I had lung hit it, so I was like, I know it's not going to run uphill. So I'm just going to stay next to the shore and follow the shoreline. And sure enough, 500 yards or so, there he was laying down up there. And again, it's like, up, down, way up, emotional roller coaster. You're just like, yes, but I was, of course, like 50 yards away, and you can only get so close. And then I was just terrified of it standing up and running off, because once you hit an animal and he stops and he sits there and bleeds for a while, there's a good chance it'll all clot up. And if he jumps up and if you scare him and he runs away, you might never find blood again, and he'll know he's being chased, and so you'll have adrenaline, and he could run for miles. And so there was no real way to finish it off.
You already knew that you had a lung shot because you could see the bubbles.
Right.
In the blood.
Right, so it's going to end. Yeah.
For people that aren't hunters, when you see the bubble in the blood, that typically means that you didn't just hit the vitals, that you actually got into the lungs, which is the goal. Right.
And so you do know that he's got a timer, he's going to die, but but you can still really screw it up and not find it. And so the only real, negative stuff I got after the show was people like, why did you let that moose suffer? But it really just wasn't an option. You can't go closer and stick another arrow in it somehow, without really risking getting attacked or having it run off, So it was like neither good option. So you just waited it out, and it kind of calmed. Finally, it stood up, and it would stand up and fall down multiple times, and every time you're so nervous because you're just like, oh, it's going to run off, and then it would drop down, and you're like, oh, yeah. Finally, it tipped over, and I went over there and touched it, and you're like, holy crap, it's dead, and that's as excited as you can possibly get.
The best day ever.
Oh, best day ever. It's hilarious. And yeah, it was a real fun.
Crazy part of that story is knowingly you only took a multi-tool as your cutting weapon, so you had to skin the entire moose with a Leatherman blade that was...
That's right. Yeah, no regrets there. It was never even a negative thought. You're just like, oh, it's a small knife, but this is awesome, man. Happy to do it again. Yeah, it worked fine. And, I'd processed enough moose in Russia with natives that it was, doable. And I hadn't done one alone, so that was a big job. And then packing it all back to camp and all that. But not a complaint at all from me, that's for sure. I was just on cloud 9.
Right. And moose are so big that when you kill them in the field like that and you're alone, it's a special situation where you don't necessarily get to pick the way the animal's laying. You kind of have to take what's given.
Yeah, exactly. You can't roll it around. Yeah, good point. Yep, for sure. You had to, and I had to do that, work with the tree that it kind of fell up against and prop its leg up with sticks while you're doing stuff. Yeah, for sure.
And then you kind of straddle one leg and try and pull the quarterback.
Exactly. Yep.
Pulling out all the tricks.
Right.
I got a question here. It says, can you do the moose call?
What was it? It's kind of let's see. You go. Something like that. Do that a bunch. Yeah. You get a little birch tube, and it sounds even better.
Hell yeah, that was so good.
And then
was that something that you got with the Evenki? Were they using bark to do?
You know, that's something I had seen over there, but they didn't often do it. So I had never like called a moose in fully like that. But I know that they do it over there. But the way the natives do it is they're just living in the woods, always doing particular things, and always on the lookout for game. So like they come across it and then they shoot it, and then it's just a constant hunt. And sometimes we'd go off, of course, on specific hunts, but I hadn't called in a moose prior to that. I had seen the birch bark calls and all that over there. So yeah.
What did you
actually
eat? Was it the tenders or the heart?
The heart, yeah, the heart's my favorite. And I had heart's great too, and it's got that big thick layer of fat on the top, and oh man, that was delicious. I even thought I was being thoughtful and saved a chunk for my wife, and then when she came 3 months later, it was just a dry up. I thought that was a better thought than it was an actual. But
it's a heart for Thanksgiving.
Yeah, exactly.
Not Thanksgiving, Valentine's.
Valentine's Day, right.
Right.
No, it was pretty wild. It was delicious, and the whole moose was with no salt, no nothing from day one to the last day. I enjoyed every meal, And at first I ate the heart, and then I would eat the liver. There's a lot of liver, so it's kind of a lot to eat. And I just, yeah, exactly. Every day eat some of it, and worked my way through that. But you got to eat the liver. That's where a lot of the nutrients are in a situation like that, vitamin A and all that. The moose marrow, marrow's a classic, delicious, fatty food, and that was super enjoyable. I made Jello, meat Jello and stuff.
With ice, a little bit of ice and marrow.
Well, you get I made ice cream like that, but I also made you have to make a Jello. It's you get the joints and you boil them, all the joints, and it turns basically into Jello, like a meat Jello.
Is it the fluid that's inside the socket? Is that
yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah. It's a Russian classic.
That stuff smells really funky when it's raw.
Yeah, I needed a little garlic would have helped, but.
Right on, man. So you end up taking it home. How many days was it that you were out there?
77.
Right on. So was that longer than you thought, shorter than you thought?
Oh, it was definitely shorter than I thought. I hadn't even, I thought it was, not even worth entertaining the idea that the show would end before day 90. And then I thought, so in my mind, I thought we got to get to day 90 and then it's going to start. And then we're going to, it's going to be me and whoever else got game, or whoever figured out sustainable fishing, and we're just going to stretch it until we're completely, miserable and cashed out. And so I thought in my mind, if I could get to day 130 or 140, that I think everyone else would tap because they would have had to sit through January in the north, which really sucks. Yeah, it would have been cold and dark and boring. And I think even if somebody has food, there's a good chance they'll go home in January. So. That's what I was going for, and I'm pretty confident I had what I needed to get there. I just, I honestly hadn't even thought that it was a potentiality that it would end yet. And so I was totally shocked. And even at the end when Jana Lee was walking up, I heard her crunching around behind me, but I just thought it was crew. I was so set on telling these guys that, this is my normal body weight. You guys better not pull me. that I didn't even look. She could have slit my throat. But it was a total shock. I was 100% surprised. And it was
you gotta be
about
totally overwhelmed when you see her, right?
Oh, yeah, man. I mean, yeah, that was amazing. What a cool moment. I'll always remember that for sure. And so much of it, because Jana Lee, after we got married, had come with me to Siberia for a winter and a summer, and so much of it I was like, man, this would be so nostalgic. I'd love for her to be able to come here and, see this or see that. I even built, a food cache, which, I always liked those. And then, so it was really cool that she came. Although they didn't look they didn't let her. She only stayed one night, and then she had to go. I was hoping that we could like stay out there for some days since they flew her up there. But yeah, no, it was pretty cool moment.
So what about the rack and the head of the moose? Is that still in your house, or where is that?
You know that sad story? No, yeah, so I had the Wolverine skull, and then when I was at base camp, doing our interview after the show, one of the dogs got a hold of it and chewed it up, so that was a bummer. And then I had the moose skull, and that was like my other big memento. I had left more than I should have, like more things that could have been sentimental, because I was like, I got the Wolverine skull and a moose skull. And then, well, then at the airport, they'd kind of alone or whatever dropped me off at the airport, and I was like, okay, here's my flight. So I had my bags and put it all on the plane. And the lady at the airport was like, what's in that bag? And I was like, oh, it's like a moose antlers. And she's like, oh, I can't let that go. You got to like package it in a hard case, because I had just like wrapped it in blankets and this and that. And basically she said it couldn't go on the plane, and I didn't have anyone to call, and so I was like, crap, and basically just set it in front of the airport door and got on my plane and left.
Dude, I bet somebody in Canada is like, dude.
Somebody in Canada. Well, the funny thing is that it's like not even like if you live in Yellowknife, you've got a lot bigger moose racks on your wall than that one. It's probably like a dog's chew toy, but to me it would be pretty awesome to have. But yeah, no sign of it yet.
So
I'll buy a little bit bigger one on eBay and say it was that one.
Yeah, just put it on the wall. No one will know. We'll edit this part out, and then nobody will ever.
Yeah.
So one thing I think that's interesting, I also had Roland on for an episode. I don't know if you saw that one.
Cool.
But
I didn't see that one. No.
He talked a lot about how his faith and spirituality affected like his mission out there. So it was interesting to me that there's two people kind of back-to-back winners that both had like some outlook on like their faith and spirituality that ended up winning back-to-back. So I'm wondering, is that like part of what it takes to be out there alone?
No, I don't want to say that you couldn't with, like otherwise, but yeah, absolutely. For me, it was really centering. It's really important to know kind of why you're doing what you're doing in general in life, and and I found myself a lot out there. You kind of have a lot going on, a lot of stuff, a lot of stressors, and I just found myself a lot just like I would just like cross myself and go, all right, kind of like it was like a cool physical action that I found I could do that would just immediately recenter me and focus me on like, hey, there's a lot more stuff than me out there. And yeah, so absolutely it was vital for me. What you find is when you go out in a place like that, in a situation like that, no matter where your spiritual path, that stuff's going to come up. It's going to become important. All of a sudden, you're going to find yourself. I thought it was amazing because I could. It just felt like constantly practicing the presence of God, as they say. You kind of always. Not like necessarily getting on my knees and praying, but just always in communion with like with the good Lord, and so it was really valuable to me, and yeah, really rich time. What's up, Hakeem?
So what's up next for Jordan? Are you doing anything big now, survival oriented?
Yeah, we've been doing classes up in the wilderness, which have been a total blast. Basically, just going out in the woods for a week into some of the places that I want to go the most, and then inviting people to come along, and yeah, those have been totally amazing. I think they came kind of at the right time because people I think now need to get off the phone, get out, kind of get away from politics a little bit, have a, see the other people that come on the course are real humans, and really cool people, and they might be from completely different walks of life. You'd probably be arguing online, but it's like just a really awesome time to have all the, get people out there. You get in nature, see each other for who we are, and yeah, it's been awesome. Not to mention, it's just so fun getting out in the woods, and it's like the combination of the two best things in the world. Not just being in the woods, but also having cool people out there. So it's yeah, I've been doing those wilderness courses. There's some spots left. They're getting booked quickly, but at like jordanjonas.com, there's a few more spots left. I'll be putting out one more week here soon, and so then I got some llamas, so I can take do some private courses if people want. Go up into the woods, and the llamas can pack our gear, and I can also take the family out and go a lot longer because I don't have to pack everybody's food.
Right. So if people want to go out with you, they can just hop on your website or your Instagram.
Yeah, jordanjonas.com is really good to see the information, and then also get on the mailing list, not only for courses, but I'm actually this year I've been a little slow on it, but I've decided to do it and just make an axe, like a Siberian Evenki native style axe, which quite honestly I just like better than any other axe I can get. It seems like a weird item to not be able to get in America, but it's like, man, I can't quite find the right axe. So I've always felt I should probably just make it, but it's like a big financial risk. But I think, I've been talking to my wife, and it's like, man, I guess let's just do it because it is pretty cool. It would be cool. I think it'll do well. I think people will like it. So you can get on my email list on my website too, and I'll let you know as that moves forward. Or Instagram, Hobo Jordo. That has all the stuff. Yeah.
Right on, man. Well, you heard it here first. You guys can go check out his courses. Jordan, this has been an excellent chat. It's been an honor for me just to hear your stories, and you're definitely one wild dude, and wish you nothing but the best.
Well, hopefully I'll run into you again sometime. That was fun. Seen you at the archery shop.
Hopefully we see each other.
If you're up in Montana, hit me up. Yeah.
All right, will do, man.
Yeah, man. Thanks for the invite. See you guys.
Right,
Thanks for tuning in. Later.
Bye, guys. Stay wild.